A poor little girl with a baby hides from the rain in a luxury car. But when the young billionaire finds her, she pleads, "Please let me stay just a little while. My baby brother is sick." And when he looks at the child, his eyes fill with tears, and he decided to do something unexpected. Rain slapped the concrete with the kind of weight that silenced everything. The office tower behind him stood like a skeleton, its windows hollowed out with darkness except for a few floors still lit. Ghosts of those who, like him, had forgotten how to go home. The parking lot stretched ahead, glistening under flickering overhead lights that turned puddles into mirrors. Lewis Matthews tightened the collar of his coat and walked fast, but not fast enough to beat the rain that had already soaked through the seams of his tailored jacket. He didn't run. Running was for people with somewhere urgent to be. He wasn't in a rush for solitude, just accustomed to it. His car greeted him with 2 flashes of headlights and the soft click of unlocked doors. The interior smelled of leather and order. He tossed his briefcase onto the passenger seat, leaned back into the driver's seat, and closed his eyes for just a second. Then he saw them, eyes, reflected in the rearview mirror. He didn't move. The rain ticked against the roof, a low, steady drumbeat. The warmth from the car heater hadn't even kicked in yet, but Louis felt his chest heat in alarm. Slowly, deliberately, he reached for the overhead light and clicked it on. In the back seat, a little girl sat huddled in a corner, a bundle of blankets in her arms. Her dark hair clung to her cheeks, damp and uneven. Her eyes, huge, watchful, not tearful, met his in the mirror. "Please don't yell," she said softly. "My brother's sick. We just needed somewhere dry." Louis's hand stayed on the door handle, frozen. He didn't speak, didn't breathe for a moment. The door was still ajar, and the cold wind knifed through the small gap, reminding him this wasn't a hallucination. He glanced around the lot, empty, silent. Rain swallowed the world outside. "How did you get in?" he finally asked, voice low, unsure if he was speaking to her or himself. "The door wasn't locked," the girl replied simply, pulling the bundle tighter. "I checked a few cars. Yours was warm inside." Louis turned fully, catching sight of a pale infant face under the layers of cloth. The baby, her brother, she'd said, made a soft, rasping sound. His phone vibrated. Grace, his assistant, probably reminding him of the board meeting tomorrow or the interview he was supposed to reschedule. He stared at the screen, thumb hovering. Declined the call. The girl watched him silently. "What's your name?" he asked. "Chloe." "And him?" "Nolan." Louis studied her. Wet shoes, too small coat, a piece of someone else's scarf looped around her shoulder like a makeshift baby sling. She couldn't have been more than 6. "This isn't safe," he muttered, unsure if he was speaking to her or scolding himself. "You can't just climb into strangers' cars." "We weren't trying to hurt anything," Chloe said, voice still soft but firm. "He has a fever, and I didn't know where else to go." Louis ran a hand through his wet hair. This wasn't part of his life. His world ran on calendars, on investment portfolios and closed doors. Not sick babies and shivering children appearing out of nowhere. There was a knock on the window. Ben, the night security guard, peered in with a cheerful grin beneath his rain-streaked cap. "Burning the midnight oil again, Mr. Matthews?" Louis quickly shifted, blocking the view of the back seat with his shoulder. He cracked the window halfway. "Just leaving," he replied, voice steady. "Car was warm. Took a second to defrost." Ben chuckled. "Gotta get you a garage spot one of these days. Maybe next year." Ben nodded and moved on. Louis shut the window with a sharp breath and turned back. Chloe hadn't moved. He stared at her, uncertain what to do next. His eyes drifted to her hands, red from the cold. She was using a torn piece of cloth to wipe Nolan's forehead. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a handkerchief, one of the few things his mother had insisted he carry, even into adulthood. Silk, monogrammed, useless most days. He handed it to her without speaking. Chloe took it, hesitated, then whispered, "Thank you. I'll give it back when it's clean." That hit him harder than he expected. Louis opened his mouth again, but nothing came out. "I don't want anything from you," Chloe added quickly. "We'll leave soon. I just didn't know where else was safe." The baby stirred, made a soft whimper. Chloe cradled him closer, blocking him instinctively from view. Louis's phone vibrated again. Another notification. A missed call. A message. He didn't look. He reached for the ignition, hand brushing the steering wheel, but he didn't turn the key. Outside, the storm had no intention of letting up. The lot was still empty. The world had folded in on itself into this strange, tight space of leather seats, quiet breaths, and a tension that didn't belong in a car like his. "What if I call someone to help you?" he said carefully. "Child services, maybe." Somewhere warm. "They'll take Nolan away," Chloe said immediately, her voice finally cracking. "They did that to someone I knew. They don't let kids stay together." Louis leaned back, letting the words settle. He could feel the weight of his coat growing heavier on his shoulders, soaked through. She was right. He had no idea what would happen next. But if he called anyone now, the moment would fracture. His thumb hovered over the phone again. He opened the screen. His finger drifted over the emergency number, and then stopped. He turned the screen off. "Just for tonight," he said quietly. "You can stay, but tomorrow we will figure something out." Chloe's eyes met his in the mirror. No smile, just a slow, solemn nod. Louis pulled the door shut against the storm, and the rain fell outside like a curtain between his world and the one that had just entered it. The rain hadn't let up. If anything, it had deepened into something steadier, more insistent, like the world outside the car was trying to wash itself away. Beyond the windshield, the lot was an ocean of reflections, lights swimming over pavement like restless ghosts. Inside, Louis Matthews sat in the driver's seat, staring straight ahead, one hand resting on the steering wheel, the other still gripping the key he hadn't turned. His breathing was even, but not calm. He felt like he'd stumbled into someone else's story, and it had locked him in. Behind him, Chloe shifted. The leather creaked under her small frame. "Nolan's 3 months," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "He gets cold fast. I tried to wrap him good, but the blanket's thin." Louis didn't answer right away. He reached forward, turned the air vents away from the back seat, and lowered the fan. The heater had started to kick in. It was the only warmth in the space, and he was hoarding it. "What about your parents?" he asked. There was a pause, a long one. "They're not here anymore," she said simply. "Mum got sick, real fast. Dad was gone before that. Don't know where." Louis looked at her in the mirror. Chloe wasn't crying. She wasn't even blinking too much. It unnerved him, the way she said it. Clean, emotionless, like she'd practiced it in her head too many times already. "You have any other family?" he asked. Chloe shook her head. "Not the kind that takes kids." He exhaled, glanced down at his phone again. 3 missed calls from Grace. 1 text message. A meeting confirmation for 8 a.m. Chloe leaned forward slightly. "Are you going to call someone?" Louis looked over his shoulder. "I don't know yet." Her eyes darkened. She pulled Nolan closer, tucking him under her chin. "They'll take him away if you do." "Chloe, that's not how it is." Her voice rose, just a touch. "I saw it happen to a girl in the shelter. Her brother was too. They said different foster homes, said it was temporary, but he cried for her every night. She never saw him again. Louis fell silent. Something in his chest, tight and unfamiliar, twisted. I promised my mum I'd keep us together, she added, quieter now. That was the last thing she said. Keep him close. Don't let them split you up. He looked at Nolan, now asleep but pale, skin flushed in that feverish way that made Louis feel suddenly, acutely helpless. His tiny hand was curled against Chloe's coat, too still. Louis reached under his seat, pulled out a bottle of water, cracked the seal, then paused. He needs something warm, not this. It's okay, Chloe said quickly. He'll be fine if I keep holding him. I'm warm enough. You're soaked. So are you. Louis almost laughed. Almost. He capped the bottle again and placed it in the console. His phone buzzed again. This time, it lit up, with Grace's name and a preview. Your slide deck has typos. Fix tonight. Chloe leaned forward a bit, craning her neck toward the screen. She's your boss? Louis smirked faintly. Something like that. She sounds important. She is. Keeps my life from falling apart most days. Chloe nodded thoughtfully, then rested her head back against the seat. Nolan's important too. He's all I've got. The words hung in the air, heavier than anything the rain could match. Louis shifted in his seat, uncomfortable in ways he didn't fully understand. He prided himself on being decisive. Clean-cut choices, risk analysis, contingency plans, but there was no model for this. He stared ahead, then looked down again at the baby. He needs medicine. A doctor. Chloe nodded. I know. I gave him Tylenol, half a dropper. It's all I had. He keeps it down, so I think it's working. You gave him your last medicine. Chloe didn't answer. Instead, she reached into her pocket and pulled out the empty plastic bottle. Found it on a shelf 2 weeks ago. The lady at the shelter said it was still good. Louis took the bottle, turned it over in his hand. Expired. Not dangerously, but enough to make him uneasy. You shouldn't have to know this stuff, he muttered, mostly to himself. I have to. Louis glanced at the clock on the dashboard. It was past midnight. The world had moved on hours ago. You hungry? He asked suddenly. Chloe blinked, surprised. Number Nolan needed the last sandwich. That's not what I asked. She hesitated. A little. He nodded once, then said, I don't have much here. But maybe something at home. Chloe's brow knit. We're not going to a shelter. No. Why not? Because... Louis paused, choosing his words carefully. Because just for tonight, I'm letting you stay. Just tonight. I don't know what happens after. Chloe's shoulders slumped in a way that looked like relief. Not happiness, just the easing of tension she'd held for too long. I understand, she whispered. Louis turned the ignition. The engine hummed to life, headlights cutting into the sheet of rain. He pulled his coat tighter, adjusted the rear view so he could see them both. Behind him, Chloe murmured, I'll still give your handkerchief back. I said I would. Louis smiled faintly, eyes on the road. You keep it. You've earned it. That night, the car didn't feel so cold. Before we get into the next part, I would love to know what kind of stories you like to read, and please watch the whole story and let me know what you think. If you like my story, please like comment number 100 in the comments. City lights slid past the windows in long liquid streaks, stretched by rain and speed. The roads glistened in silence, slick with water and nearly empty, as if the world had paused somewhere between one breath and the next. Inside the car, the only sound was the slow, steady whisper of the tires on wet asphalt. Louis drove slower than usual. His fingers gripped the wheel too tightly, his eyes flicking between the road ahead and the rearview mirror. Chloe hadn't spoken since they left the lot. She sat in the same position, arms wrapped around Nolan, eyes wide open. She wasn't asleep. Neither was Nolan. His breathing was shallow, hoarse in a way that gnawed at the back of Lewis's mind. Still, he didn't know what to say, not without breaking the strange, heavy quiet that had settled between them like mist. Chloe's voice came soft, but certain. "I don't sleep when he's sick. I listen to every breath." Lewis glanced at her reflection. "That's a lot to carry for someone your age." "I'd rather carry it than lose him." A traffic light blinked yellow ahead. Lewis slowed to a stop. The intersection was empty, drenched in white light and rainfall. A bus passed on the far side of the street, its wheels hissing as it vanished into the fog. "I don't sleep much either," Louis murmured. "Because of your brother." "I don't have a brother." She was quiet a moment, then asked, "Then who do you stay awake for?" He hesitated. "No one, really." The light turned green. The car rolled forward. Louis kept one hand on the wheel and reached with the other to adjust the mirror. Chloe was stroking Nolan's forehead, slow and rhythmic. The baby didn't stir. Chloe's voice came again, tentative. "Is your house far?" "Not too far." "Big?" Louis gave a half shrug. "Some would say so." She looked out the window for a moment, then asked, "Does anyone else live there?" "No." "Why not?" The question surprised him. It wasn't prying, just curious, honest. "I guess I like the quiet," Louis said. Chloe turned back toward him. "I used to think I liked quiet, but then it got too big." He didn't respond, but he felt it, the weight of what she'd said, the kind of quiet that stops being peace and starts becoming absence, the kind that echoes. A small cough came from the back seat. Nolan's face turned slightly, his fingers twitching. Chloe pulled him tighter. Louis noticed the twitch of panic in her shoulders. "He's okay," he said quickly. "Just a cough." Chloe didn't relax. He stopped breathing once, at the shelter, just for a few seconds, but it felt like an hour. Louis glanced at the side of the road, then pulled into a parking lane without saying anything. He shifted into park, turned halfway in his seat, and looked back. Chloe met his gaze, wary. "Is something wrong?" she asked. He gestured toward Nolan. "I needed to see, to make sure." Chloe lifted the edge of the blanket. Nolan's chest rose and fell, uneven but steady. Louis nodded, swallowed. "Sorry. You looked scared." Chloe looked down. "I always look scared. People don't see it anymore." There was a silence. Not uncomfortable, just full. Louis turned forward again, took a deep breath, and pulled back onto the road. After a few blocks, Chloe spoke again. "Is it a good house?" Louis raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "I mean, warm, not just the heater. Warm like safe." He didn't answer right away. "It's clean, big, has security, but I don't know if I'd call it warm." Chloe leaned her head against the window, rain sliding down just inches from her face. "Then maybe it needs a little bit of noise." Louis glanced at her. "You planning on making noise?" Chloe smiled, small and tired. "Nolan does most of the work." Louis chuckled under his breath. The sound surprised him. They turned onto a side street lined with tall buildings, most of them dark. The tower where he lived stood at the end, modern and glass-wrapped, glowing faintly like a lighthouse through fog. Chloe sat up straighter. "This is where you live?" "Top floor." She didn't say anything, just stared at the building like it was from another planet. Then, after a moment, "What if someone sees us?" "No one will," Louis said. "Private elevator, no neighbors." Chloe looked back at Nolan. "He's asleep. Finally." "Just in time," Louis said. We're here." He slowed the car at the entrance. For a second, he didn't move. Then he turned to look at her again. "Still want to come in?" Chloe nodded. "You said, just for tonight." "Just for tonight," he repeated. Since the night began, the words didn't sound like a warning. They sounded like a promise. The elevator opened without a sound, gliding to a halt on the top floor of the building. Cool white light spilled into a hallway lined with minimalist art and polished floors that echoed even the softest footsteps. Everything smelled faintly of steel and citrus, like it had just been cleaned, or perhaps never really used. Louis stepped inside first, keys in hand, then held the door open for Chloe. She didn't hesitate. She adjusted Nolan in her arms, kept her chin slightly lifted, and walked in with the quiet determination of someone who didn't expect kindness, but had learned to read danger in the smallest details. He watched as her eyes scanned the space, not wide with wonder like a child entering a castle, but focused, calculating. Her gaze moved across the glass walls, the sleek leather furniture, the untouched kitchen counters. Then it flicked toward the door again, toward the locks. "You can sit," Louis offered, unsure of what else to say. "Or put him down if you want." Chloe shook her head. "I'll hold him." Louis nodded and moved toward the open kitchen. He hesitated at the fridge. "Do you want something to drink? There's water, orange juice, maybe milk." Chloe's voice came, steady. "Just a blanket for him." He paused. "Right, of course." He crossed the apartment, opened the hallway closet, and began pulling out spare linens, expensive throws, designer cashmere, a too crisp comforter still folded in its packaging. All of it felt too stiff, too foreign. Nothing soft, nothing real. He muttered to himself, frustration building. There's got to be something. He opened another cabinet, then another. Nothing that looked like comfort. Then, behind the coat rack near the door, he spotted it. An old sweater, navy blue, pilled at the sleeves, a little stretched at the collar, forgotten, familiar. He held it in his hands for a moment. It had been his mother's gift, back when she still sent things on birthdays. "So you don't always have to dress like the world's ending," she'd joked. He hadn't worn it in years, but it was warm. He walked back into the living room and held it out. "This'll have to do," he said. "It's not a blanket, but it's something." Chloe looked up at him, then at the sweater. She took it carefully, cradled Nolan closer, and began wrapping it gently around him. The baby stirred, let out a soft sigh, then settled. "Thank you," she murmured. "It smells like real clothes." Louis sat down across from her, elbows on his knees. "What do fake clothes smell like?" "Ones no one ever wore," she said, not smiling, just saying it like it was a fact. "Ones made for looking, not living." Louis leaned back slightly, taking in the room through her lens. Chrome surfaces, a coffee table made of glass, a couch no one had napped on. He checked his phone. 2 more texts from Grace, one with a file attachment, one just a single word. "Status?" He turned the screen face down. Chloe hadn't touched the juice he'd placed on the end table. She sat still, holding her brother, legs tucked up under her. Her coat had dripped water onto the white rug. She seemed to notice, because she moved her foot just slightly off the wet patch. "You don't have to worry about that," Louis said. "I always worry," she replied. The answer wasn't defiant, just factual. He nodded once, then stood. "Let me find some towels." As he disappeared down the hallway, Chloe's eyes returned to the door. She rose carefully, stepped toward it. She studied the deadbolt, the chain, the peephole. Her fingers hovered above the knob, but didn't touch it. She wasn't trying to leave. She was checking the exit. When Louis returned, holding 2 towels and a pair of socks. He wasn't sure why he grabbed. He stopped short. Chloe had already returned to the couch, as if she'd never moved. He handed her the towels. She took them without a word and began patting Nolan dry through the sweater. The socks sat unused beside her. "I'm guessing this isn't your first night in someone else's place," Louis said quietly. Chloe didn't look up. "Not the first, but most don't have elevators like that." Louis sank back into his chair. "I've never had a guest who memorized the floor plan so fast." Chloe didn't react. "You ever been in a place like this before?" he asked after a moment. She shrugged. "Places look nice sometimes. Doesn't mean they're safe." Her words landed heavier than he expected. There was a silence, and then her voice came again, softer now. "When we stayed in shelters, I used to pretend I was somewhere like this, with warm floors and food in the fridge and no bugs, but I never thought about the quiet." Louis tilted his head. "What about the quiet?" "It's loud," she said, "when it's just you." Louis didn't say anything. The room felt colder suddenly, or maybe more honest. His phone buzzed again, and this time he didn't even glance at it. "Do you want to sleep on the couch?" he asked. "I'll sit up with Nolan," Chloe said. "He sleeps better when he's close." Louis nodded, stood again. "I'll get a pillow at least." He walked away, but her voice followed him. "Is it really just you here?" she asked. He paused in the hallway, one hand on the doorframe. "Yeah," he said, "just me." "Then why do you lock the door so tight?" He turned slightly, met her eyes across the room. "Maybe because I'm scared too." And this time, Chloe didn't look surprised. The city had gone still. The lights below the penthouse flickered like distant stars, blurred by the fog clinging to the windows. Inside, the silence deepened, heavy as the hours passed, broken only by the occasional groan of the building settling into its bones. Louis stirred in bed, eyes opening to the dark. He hadn't really been asleep, just hovering somewhere between thought and dream, haunted by fragments of childhood. The hollow quiet of his father's study, the echo of footsteps down empty halls, a small voice calling out for someone who never came. He sat up, rubbing a hand across his face. Then he heard it, a sound not from memory, but from the present, quiet at first, like cloth rustling, then urgent. A sharp, wet cough, the clink of a glass, a soft, panicked sob. He was on his feet before his brain caught up. The hallway was dim, just enough light from the oven clock to show him the way. As he turned the corner into the living room, he saw her. Chloe was crouched on the floor beside the couch, her tiny hands shaking as she dipped a washcloth into a bowl of cold water. The towel soaked through immediately, her grip fumbling. She wrung it out unevenly and pressed it gently to Nolan's forehead, who was now red-faced and twitching under the oversized sweater. "Don't be hot," she whispered through clenched teeth. "Don't be hot, please." "I'm here. I'm right here." Tears were streaking her cheeks. She wasn't crying loudly, just crumbling in silence, as if she didn't believe she had the right to fall apart. Louis stepped forward, voice low. "Chloe." She jerked around, eyes wide, body shielding Nolan. I'm sorry," she stammered. "I didn't mean to wake anyone. I think he's getting worse." Louis knelt beside her without hesitation. He reached out, but paused an inch from the baby's skin. "Can I check?" Chloe nodded, teeth pressing into her lower lip. Louis touched Nolan's forehead. It was burning. His skin felt too dry, too tight. The baby gave a soft cry, barely a sound. "We need a doctor," Louis said. "No," Chloe said instantly, gripping Nolan tighter. "They'll ask questions. They'll take him. Please. He just needs to cool down." "I know you're scared," Louis said gently, "but I'm not calling strangers. I have someone I trust." Chloe didn't answer. She looked at Nolan, then at Lewis. Something warred behind her eyes. Then finally she whispered, "Promise." Lewis nodded. "Promise." He stood, pulled out his phone, and walked to the kitchen. His fingers hovered for a second, then tapped a contact. "Dr. Patel. Private." The line rang once. Then, "Louis? You all right? I need you to come. Now." A pause. "What happened?" "It's not me. It's a baby, a 3-month-old. Fever's spiking. I don't think we have time to wait." Another pause, this one shorter. "Address?" Dr. Patel asked. Louis gave it. "Thank you. I'll be there in 20. He returned to the living room. Chloe was still kneeling, pressing the cool cloth to Nolan's neck now, murmuring words too soft to catch. Her whole body was curled around her brother, arms forming a barrier. Louis crouched beside her again, this time placing a fresh towel in the bowl. "He's coming. His name's Dr. Patel. He's been with my family for years." Chloe looked up at him. "He won't call anyone." "Number. He's not that kind of doctor." 15 minutes later, the doorbell rang. Lewis opened it before the second chime. Dr. Patel stepped in, still buttoning his coat. Late 50s, calm eyes, sharp mind. He held a black medical bag, like something from another era. "You weren't kidding," the doctor said, his voice low. "This is urgent." Louis gestured toward the living room. Chloe looked up as he approached, her posture tense but unmoving. Dr. Patel knelt slowly, with the grace of someone who's done this 1,000 times. He offered Chloe a small smile. "Hi, I'm here to help your brother, okay? Nothing else." She hesitated, then leaned back just enough to let him work. The exam was swift, but thorough. Thermometer, stethoscope, practiced fingers against a tiny wrist. "Fever's high, but not unmanageable," Dr. Patel said. "Looks like a respiratory infection. Might have started as a cold, but his immune system's not strong." He opened his bag, pulled out a small vial, and dropper. "This will help bring the fever down. He'll need rest, fluids, and constant temperature checks. I'll leave enough for the next 2 days." Lewis exhaled, tension bleeding out of his spine. Dr. Patel glanced up. "You two the parents?" Louis opened his mouth, closed it, then said, "No, not exactly." The doctor raised an eyebrow. "Foster?" "No," Louis said again, slower. They just needed help. I didn't plan this." Dr. Patel's gaze lingered on him. He wasn't judging, just reading, the way doctors do. "You never plan the people who matter most," he said quietly. Then he looked at Chloe, who hadn't let go of Nolan's hand the entire time. "He's going to be okay," he said to her. "You did the right thing, keeping him warm. You're a good sister." Chloe didn't speak, but she nodded once. As Dr. Patel packed up, he murmured to Louis, "This is more than a favor, you know." Lewis nodded. "I know." At the door, the doctor paused. "You'll call if it worsens?" "I will." Patel looked at him, then added, "You've never called me for anyone before." Lewis watched him go. When he turned back, Chloe was still curled around Nolan on the couch, her eyes half shut now, exhaustion overtaking fear. "Chloe," he said softly. She looked up, barely. "Can we stay until he's better?" she asked. Louis didn't hesitate. "Yes." She closed her eyes, trusting that single word, and the penthouse felt almost like a place someone could recover in. The light outside had turned pale and grey, soft like wet paper. Morning bled gently into the penthouse, creeping across the floors, catching on the edges of glass and steel. The city below yawned awake in slow motion, but inside, the apartment felt suspended, quiet, still, waiting. Louis stood in the kitchen, staring at the open fridge. He wasn't hungry. He hadn't slept, not really, A mug of untouched coffee rested near the sink, cooling fast. Behind him, the silence of the living room was heavier than before, not from worry, but from something else. Expectation. He turned around slowly. Chloe sat at the edge of the couch, jacket still on, arms around Nolan, who was now sleeping with a flushed but calmer face. She hadn't touched the toast he'd left on the side table. "Is he better?" Lewis asked. Chloe nodded. "The fever's going down." "That's good." She looked at him for a long time, as if choosing her words carefully. Then finally, "Are you going to take us somewhere today?" Louis didn't answer. Not right away. Her voice hadn't wavered, but her fingers clutched Nolan's sweater tighter. It was the kind of question that shouldn't belong to a child. He exhaled slowly. "I don't know." Chloe looked down, her tone even quieter. "That means yes." Lewis walked over, sat on the armrest of a nearby chair, elbows resting on his knees. He tried to speak, but nothing came out. Instead, what rose up was memory, uninvited and sharp. He was 8, a social worker's office, bright posters peeling on the wall, a plastic chair too cold for comfort. His hands clenched around a duffel bag that didn't even belong to him, and a question no one had ever answered. "Where am I going now?" He swallowed, looked at Chloe. "Why didn't you go to a shelter?" he asked. "A children's home?" She didn't flinch. "We did, a few times." Louis waited. "But they said Nolan was too young, that he'd need to go to a different place. They always say that, about babies and toddlers. Different needs, different care. They don't care if we're family." He leaned forward slightly. "And your mother?" Chloe glanced down at her brother. "She got sick fast. She made me promise. Stay together, no matter what. No one leaves." Lewis closed his eyes. It wasn't pity he felt. It was something closer to recognition. Chloe spoke again. "If you take us to one of those places, they'll separate us." "I wouldn't let that happen," he said, though even as he said it, he wasn't sure what part of him was speaking, his heart or his guilt. "You can't stop them," Chloe said. "You're not our family." Louis didn't know how to respond to that. She wasn't wrong. They sat like that for a while. The city buzzed below them, invisible but steady. The coffee had gone cold, untouched. A soft knock against the glass door drew Lewis's eyes. A small black bird landed briefly on the balcony rail, then flew off again. He turned back to Chloe. "Why are you still wearing your jacket?" She shrugged. "You don't take off your jacket in someone's house unless you know you're allowed to stay." His throat tightened. "You're allowed?" Chloe looked at him. "For how long?" Louis didn't answer. A phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. He didn't check it. "I don't know," he said finally. "I'm figuring it out." Chloe nodded like she understood. Maybe she did. There was a framed photo on the sideboard. He hadn't looked at it in years. He picked it up now without thinking. A woman in a yellow scarf stood beside a boy on a wooden bridge. Autumn leaves, smiling but tired. His mother. The photo wasn't fancy, just a printout from an old camera phone. Chloe followed his gaze. "Is that her?" she asked. "Yeah." "She looks kind." She was. There was a pause. Then Chloe said, "Did you ever get left behind?" Louis set the frame down slowly. "More than once." Chloe didn't say anything, just adjusted Nolan's head on her lap. "Do you think kids need a reason to stay?" she asked quietly. "Like, a real reason." Louis turned to look at her. "What do you mean?" "I mean, do we have to prove something to be allowed to stay somewhere?" Lewis's voice was low. "No." "Then why are we always waiting to be told to leave?" He couldn't answer that. Chloe looked toward the window. The fog was lifting. A soft light touched the edges of her face, and for the first time, She looked less like a child on guard, and more like a child simply waiting for someone to mean what they said. Louis stood, crossed to the table, and poured the cold coffee down the sink. He set the mug aside. Then he walked back to her. "You're not going anywhere today," he said. She blinked. "Not tomorrow either," he added. "We'll take this, one day at a time." Chloe said nothing, but her hand slowly relaxed around Nolan's sweater. In the quiet that followed, Louis realized something. Not all questions had answers. But sometimes, the way you stayed was enough. The air was clearer that morning, the sky outside the tall windows a gentle blue-gray. No fog, no storm. Just sunlight creeping carefully across the hardwood floors, lighting up corners that hadn't seen warmth in years. The silence inside the penthouse wasn't heavy today. It felt curious. Louis stood in his office, phone to his ear. He spoke quietly, one hand tucked into the pocket of his slacks, eyes trained on the floor. "I need you to find something, Grace," he said. A pause. 2 children. Chloe, maybe 6 years old, and a baby boy, Nolan, no last name, possibly abandoned or undocumented. Start with local shelters, hospitals, anywhere that logs missing minors. Grace didn't respond right away. Then, "Are you in some kind of trouble?" "No," Louis replied, then hesitated. "But they might be. And keep this off the record, please." Another silence, longer this time. "I'll see what I can find," she said at last. "Thank you." He ended the call and set the phone down on the glass desk. His reflection in the surface looked foreign, drawn, tired, but softer. He didn't know how to name what he felt. That was becoming a pattern lately. From the kitchen, faint sounds filtered through. Silverware clinking, cabinet doors opening. No cartoons, no whining, just movement. Intentional. Quiet. He stepped out. Chloe stood on her tiptoes at the counter, holding a damp cloth in one hand and a glass cup in the other. She was wiping the rim carefully before placing it upside down on a towel beside the sink. Nolan was on a folded blanket nearby, kicking gently, watching the sunlight dance on the ceiling. "You're up early," Louis said. "I never sleep late," she replied, without turning around. He watched her reach for another cup, her movements precise, like she'd done this 100 times. "You don't have to clean," he added. "I know, but it feels better when things are clean, like you're not taking space for free." Louis leaned against the doorframe. "You're not." Chloe didn't argue, but she didn't agree either. She rinsed the last cup, dried her hands, and crossed over to Nolan. With the same care, she unwrapped his swaddle, checked his diaper, then reached for a bowl of warm water and a clean cloth. "You've done that before," Louis observed. Chloe nodded. "Lots. Where'd you learn?" She didn't answer right away. Then, "My mum. Before she got really sick, she showed me everything. What to do when Nolan cries, how to warm a bottle when you don't have a microwave, how to check if a rash is bad." Louis lowered himself into one of the dining chairs. He hadn't touched breakfast yet. "She sounds smart." "She was," Chloe said, then added, so quietly he almost missed it. "She said it was her job to teach me fast, in case she didn't get to stay." A lump formed in Louis's throat. He watched Chloe rinse the cloth again and press it to Nolan's stomach, cooing softly. "Do you still have anything of hers?" he asked. Chloe glanced toward the couch. "Her notebook." She got up, retrieved a worn, thin book from a canvas tote. Its cover was bent, a few pages loose. She handed it over carefully. Louis turned the first page. Handwriting, small and neat. Notes like, "Boil water, cool before giving." "Diaper rash cream, aloe plus baby powder. Cheap ones work too." There was a song written halfway down a page, lyrics to a lullaby, scribbled out, then rewritten. She wrote that for Nolan, Chloe explained. Said I should sing it when I'm scared, even if he's not. Lewis closed the notebook gently. He returned it with both hands. She gave you a lot in a short time, he said. Chloe nodded. Everything she could. There was a quiet beat. Then Chloe asked, Did your mum teach you stuff too? Louis looked down at the table, ran his fingers along the edge. She taught me how to tie a tie, how to write thank you notes, how to hold your breath when you feel like crying. Chloe was silent. Louis looked up and smiled faintly. And how to pick the softest sweater in a store without touching every single one. That's a good trick, Chloe said, finally smiling back. He studied her then, not with curiosity, but with a kind of reverence. The way she carried herself, the quiet responsibility. She didn't move like a 6-year-old. She moved like someone who'd been forced to grow in places kids weren't meant to reach. Chloe cradled Nolan again, who blinked up sleepily. He likes music, she said, even when it's just humming. Louis stood and walked to the shelf by the window. He pulled out an old Bluetooth speaker, dusted it off with his sleeve, and connected it to his phone. What kind of music? He asked. Chloe thought for a moment. Not loud, not too happy, just soft. He found something instrumental, piano, gentle and slow. As the music began to fill the room, Louis watched the sound settle into the spaces between them, the kind of warmth that didn't ask for anything, but stayed anyway. Chloe sat cross-legged on the couch now, rocking Nolan slightly. Louis stayed standing, arms crossed. Do you think, she asked, not looking up, this place would feel less empty if someone else lived here? He blinked. I haven't really thought about it. She finally met his eyes. I think it already does. And just like that, in the middle of quiet music, warm air, and a baby gurgling in soft light, Lewis Matthews felt something shift. Not a dramatic change, not a decision, just the unmistakable sensation of a space beginning to mean something. Something almost like home. The afternoon light stretched long across the floors, turning sharp angles soft. The penthouse, once silent in its stillness, now held the quiet of someone breathing in another room. A different kind of quiet, shared, present, waiting. Louis sat at his desk again, laptop open in front of him. A folder sat in his inbox, marked Confidential, subject Chloe and Nolan. It had arrived from Grace less than an hour ago. He hadn't opened it right away. Now he did. There were only a few pages, sparse notes, no case file, no child services history, no legal trail, just medical records, a brief obituary, and a short report from a community nurse. Mother, Angela James, deceased. Cause, stage 4 cancer, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Date of death, 3 months ago. Next of kin, none listed. Children, Chloe James, approximately age 6. Nolan James, 3 months at time of death. Lewis's eyes scanned every word. Twice, 3 times. The documents read like a story someone had started and never finished. No father, no grandparents, no record of emergency placement. Just one line at the bottom. Last seen, post-funeral, leaving a low-income housing unit. Witnesses report child holding infant. No formal report filed. No one had come looking. Not officially, not even quietly. A second email arrived, a photo. Grace had found it in hospital records. Angela James, in a hospital gown, holding Nolan, while Chloe sat on the edge of the bed, her legs dangling. The image was grainy. Chloe looked smaller and tired, her eyes impossibly wide. But Angela smiled. Not a weak smile, not a forced one. A full, brave smile that said, I'm here. I'm still here for them. Louis stared at the photo for a long time, the cursor blinking next to the subject line like a metronome. The knock at his door startled him. He minimized the screen and turned. Chloe stood there, small, barefoot, still in the oversized sweater. "Can I come in?" He nodded. She walked up slowly, looked at the desk but didn't ask questions. Her eyes flicked to the photo for half a second before returning to him. "You look sad," she said. Louis managed a breath. "I was reading something. About us." He didn't answer right away. Then, "Yes." Chloe stepped closer, gaze steady. "It's okay. I know people look us up." "This wasn't just looking," he said quietly. "I needed to understand. I needed to know what happened to your mum." Chloe's voice went soft. She died in a room with white curtains and a buzzing light. But she made sure we had food that day. And she made me promise to stay together. Chloe nodded. Louis reached behind him and picked up the printed photo Grace had included. He held it out gently. Chloe looked at it, then took it with both hands, holding it like it might break. "She looks tired," she whispered. "She also looks strong," Louis said. Chloe nodded, her lips pressed tightly. She didn't want anyone to cry. I bet she didn't want you to be alone either. Chloe sat on the edge of a chair. She didn't believe in systems, said they forget people. That's why she told me how to make baby wipes from paper towels and warm water, how to boil pasta in a coffee maker. Louis blinked. "She really taught you everything." "She didn't want to leave blanks," Chloe said, looking down at her hands. "She said if you leave too many blanks, people fill them in wrong." The words hit harder than they should have. Louis thought of his own file, his own social worker, once calling him quiet but unpredictable, just because he didn't cry on the right day. He leaned forward. "You left after the funeral. No one came to get you?" "No one asked," Chloe said. "No one really saw us. They said they'd process everything later. So I packed a bag, took the stroller. We walked to the bus station." "You did that on your own?" Chloe nodded. "I watched a lot of grown-ups. It's not hard if you don't look lost." Louis swallowed hard. "You shouldn't have had to do that. I didn't want to wait for someone who wouldn't come." The room went quiet again. Louis opened a drawer and pulled out the small, worn notebook Chloe's mother had written in. He placed it next to the photo of his own mother on the shelf. Two legacies, side by side. "I never knew my dad," he said suddenly. "My mum tried, but she worked too much. I spent a lot of time waiting for her in empty rooms. When she died, no one told me right away. Just handed me a bag and told me I'd be staying somewhere new." Chloe looked up. "Were you scared?" He nodded. "Not at first. At first, I thought maybe I'd just wait and someone would come. Did they?" "No." Chloe didn't say anything. She just looked down at the photo again. Louis whispered, almost to himself, "I was this kid. Once. Exactly this." He stood, walked over to the window, then turned back. "You're not in a blank file anymore." Chloe looked confused. "What do you mean?" "I mean, someone sees you now." She didn't smile, but her eyes changed, just slightly. Something in them dropped its guard. At the doorway, Nolan let out a soft cry from the living room. Chloe stood. "He's probably hungry." She turned to go, then stopped. "Thank you," she said, without looking back, "for seeing us." Louis watched her leave, then looked at the photo again. Two mothers, two children. Only this time, maybe the story wouldn't end where it had always ended before. The sky that evening wore a muted gold, folding light across the floorboards like a quiet invitation. Wind brushed softly against the windows, but inside the penthouse, the stillness had shape now, like something had taken root, not loud, just present. The space no longer felt hollow. It felt like it was waiting for something to stay. Louis stood in the entryway, arms crossed, watching Chloe carefully place folded towels into a low drawer. She moved with unspoken certainty, like someone who knew how to live in borrowed spaces without leaving a mark. "Chloe," he said gently. She looked up, blinking. "Yes?" Louis gestured toward the couch and walked over slowly. "Can we talk for a minute?" She didn't hesitate, but her eyes held something guarded. She sat across from him, folding her small hands into her lap. Nolan lay nearby in his little nest of blankets, cooing softly to himself. Louis took a breath. "I've been thinking," he said, "about this. All of it." Chloe said nothing, but her fingers tightened slightly. "I know things are complicated," Louis continued, his voice low, measured, "and I don't have answers for everything yet. But I want to ask you something." She nodded, wary. He met her eyes. "Would you want to stay here? With me? Not just tonight. Longer." Chloe didn't react right away. Her face didn't light up. She didn't gasp or smile. She just looked at him, long and quiet, as though trying to understand if the words were real. After a while, she spoke. "I don't need a nice house," Louis nodded. "I don't care about soft blankets or shiny floors," she added. "I just need Nolan not to be taken." Louis leaned forward slightly. "No one's taking him." She held his gaze. "Even if they say you can't keep us." Louis hesitated for only a second. Then I'll fight them." Chloe's shoulders dropped, just a little, enough for him to see how much weight she'd been carrying. She looked down at her hands. "Then, yes, I'd like to stay." Louis placed a hand gently on her shoulder. Not hurried, not performative, just steady. "Okay," he said softly. "Then we'll figure this out together." From the side table, his phone buzzed. A message from Grace lit the screen. "Grace, I spoke to a family lawyer I trust. Sent you a few options for guardianship. You're really doing this, huh?" Louis smiled faintly. He picked up the phone and typed back, "LOUIS. Yes. I'm really doing this." Chloe rose, walked over to Nolan, and picked him up with practiced care. The baby giggled, reaching out one hand, fingers brushing across Louis's shirt sleeve as she passed. He looked down at Nolan's face, and for the first time, the baby smiled at him. A real, open, uncomplicated smile. Louis felt something in his chest shift again, like a gear long stuck finally clicking into place. "Guess he approves," Chloe said. Louis chuckled. "He has good judgment." She walked toward the hallway. "I'm going to change him before he explodes." "Need help?" Louis offered. Chloe smirked. "Not unless you like being peed on." "I'll pass." She disappeared around the corner. Louis stayed seated for a moment, letting the weight of the moment settle in. Then, with quiet purpose, he stood and crossed to the small entryway closet. He pulled out a new pair of children's slippers, still with tags on, and placed them next to his own leather shoes by the door. He stepped back, looked at the two pairs, big and small, polished and new. The doorbell rang, startling him. He opened it to find Mr. Beach, the older man from the floor above, standing there in his cardigan, holding a small paper bag. "Evening," Mr. Beach said, peering past him. "Heard baby noises coming through the vents last night. Thought maybe you had a visitor." Louis stepped aside. "Not a visitor. They're staying." Mr. Beach raised his brows. "Well then, I guess congratulations are in order. Or sympathy, depending on how long the crying lasts." Louis chuckled. "I'll take both." Mr. Beach handed him the bag. "Chamomile tea. Helps with nerves. Yours or the kids'. Works on both." "Thank you," Louis said, genuinely touched. As the neighbor turned to go, he added over his shoulder, "Looks good on you, by the way." "What does?" "Not being alone." Louis stood at the door for a moment longer after it closed, then turned, walked slowly back inside. Chloe emerged with Nolan in fresh clothes, looking like a miniature explorer in footy pajamas. She saw the slippers and paused. "They're for you," Louis said. Chloe stared at them, then down at her bare feet. She didn't move for a long second. Then, without a word, she slipped them on, one at a time. They fit. Louis smiled. "Looks like they found the right feet." Chloe gave the smallest laugh. "They're soft. You can leave them by the door if you want. That's where shoes go when you live somewhere." She looked up at him, the slightest crease in her brow. "Live?" Louis nodded. "If that's what you want." Chloe glanced at Nolan, who yawned in her arms, then back at Louis. "I think maybe we already started." And now, Louis Matthews didn't feel like he was offering someone a place to stay. He felt like someone had finally come home. The morning was crisp, the kind that carried a quiet clarity. Through the glass storefronts of the city, light reflected in sharp lines off cars and puddles left by a night's soft rain. Outside the courthouse, people hurried past, unaware that, inside, 3 lives were changing. Louis stood near the elevator, holding Nolan against his chest in a grey sling the store clerk had insisted was perfect for beginners. He hadn't argued. Chloe stood beside him, small hand wrapped around a plastic bag of baby socks, bibs, and an extra pacifier. They had just signed the temporary guardianship papers. It wasn't final. Nothing was. But it was real. "You were very quiet back there," Louis said, as they stepped outside into the sunlight. Chloe kept walking, eyes low. "Paper makes things permanent," Louis nodded. "Sometimes it makes things possible too." She didn't answer. They crossed the street, and Louis guided them toward a children's boutique. Chloe paused at the door. "We don't have to go in," she said quickly. "We already got Nolan's things." Louis tilted his head. "We haven't gotten anything for you." "I'm okay." He opened the door anyway. Inside, the store was soft and bright. Fabric smelled faintly of baby powder and cotton. Tamra, the store clerk, looked up from behind the counter and blinked. "Oh. Wow, Mr. Matthews," she said, setting down a folded onesie. "Didn't expect to see you in here." Louis gave a small smile. "First time for everything." Tamra glanced at Chloe, then Nolan, then back at Louis with a twinkle in her eye. "So this is the little team I've heard about. Making you soft already, huh?" Louis didn't deny it. Chloe wandered toward the baby section, eyes scanning shelves. Her hands reached instinctively for the smaller sizes. Diapers, teething toys, a bundle of warm onesies. "You can look at your size too," Louis said gently. She didn't turn. "Nolan grows fast." Louis took a step closer. "So do you." She pulled a small packet of formula from a shelf and quietly tucked it into the basket. Then, while pretending to browse, slid a lollipop beside it, cherry-flavored. Louis raised an eyebrow. "That for you." Chloe shook her head. "It's for Nolan's birthday." "He doesn't have teeth." "He will." Tamara came by with a cart. "Need help finding anything?" "We're okay," Chloe answered before Louis could speak. Tamara smiled. "You're the boss, then." Chloe didn't answer. She moved to another aisle. Louis turned to Tamara. "She won't pick anything for herself." Tamara shrugged. "That's how you know she needs it most." When they stepped back outside, bags in hand, Louis asked, "Still hungry?" Chloe shook her head. "Nolan is." "We'll stop somewhere." As they walked down the block, Chloe's pace slowed. The street had filled with people, tourists, kids, noise. A musician played a violin at the corner, A child tripped and cried. A group of teenagers shouted across the plaza. Louis felt Chloe press closer. Then her hand reached for his. He didn't move. Just let her take it. She whispered, "I get scared in crowds." Louis nodded, tightening his grip just slightly. "I know the feeling." "Sometimes," she added, her voice barely above the wind, "I used to pretend someone was holding my hand. So, I wouldn't feel so small." He looked down at her, then ahead, watching the crowd move in waves around them. "I used to pretend that too," he said quietly, "and I still got lost." They walked a few more steps in silence. Then Chloe said, "What if I get lost now?" Louis slowed, stopping just before the crosswalk. He turned toward her, crouched slightly so they were eye level. "Then I'll find you," he said, "every time." Chloe's eyes were wide, unsure. Louis offered her a crooked smile. "I've been lost before, Chloe, but this time I'm walking with you." A long pause. Then she nodded once, tightened her grip on his hand, and said, "Okay." Behind them, the courthouse stood tall. Ahead, the street buzzed with life. Chloe walked beside him, Nolan against his chest, and for the first time in a long time, Louis Matthews didn't feel like he was making a decision. He felt like he'd arrived. The apartment no longer echoed. Now it sang. Soft laughter spilling from the hallway, Nolan's giggles bouncing off the tile, the gentle clatter of dishes from a kitchen finally in use. Warmth drifted through the air, not just from the oven, but from the unmistakable scent of something shared. Butter, cinnamon, a touch of vanilla. Life had taken root. Louis stood by the kitchen island, sleeves rolled up awkwardly, a carrot in one hand and a vegetable peeler in the other. He'd peeled more skin off his knuckles than the vegetable itself. "You're doing it wrong," Chloe said plainly, from the stool beside him. Louis raised an eyebrow. "I'm following the instructions." "You're not. That end's supposed to go first." He flipped the carrot and tried again. Still uneven. Chloe gave a tiny laugh and reached for the next one. "You're better at phone calls and contracts. Maybe let me do the carrots." Louis surrendered with mock defeat and moved to wipe his hands. "Fine, I'll tackle the dishes." Grace, standing in the doorway, leaned against the frame with a smirk. "This is not what I expected." Louis turned. "What did you expect?" "I don't know. Stark silence. Anxiety. Maybe a baby monitor hooked up to a Bloomberg terminal." She stepped in, surveying the scattered crayons on the table, the stack of picture books on the couch, and Nolan, asleep, in a baby sling, wrapped around Louis's chest. "But this is a sitcom waiting to happen." Chloe looked up. "What's a sitcom?" Louis chuckled. "Nothing you need to worry about." Grace raised an eyebrow. "Actually, she could probably write one." They sat down together for dinner. Chloe having done most of the prep, Louis insisting on setting the table, and Grace lingering to sip tea and supervise. The meal was simple: scrambled eggs, toast, and some sliced apples, but it felt like a celebration in disguise. After Grace left with a reluctant, "Call me if you burn anything," or adopt another child, Louis turned down the lights and let Chloe pick a lullaby station from the speaker. Nolan was already nodding off again in his arms. "Chloe," he said gently as she sat curled up in the armchair, "there's something I want to show you." He walked into the office and returned with a thin envelope. Inside, a folded letter worn at the creases. His fingers brushed over the edges before he handed it to her. "My assistant found this," he said softly. "Your mother wrote it. She must have given it to someone before she passed. It made its way to us." Chloe took the letter carefully, holding it with both hands as though it might crumble. She looked up at him, unsure. "Do you want me to read it to you?" he asked. She nodded. Lewis sat down on the floor, Nolan still pressed to his chest, and unfolded the page. He cleared his throat. To whoever finds this, if you're reading this, it's because I couldn't stay long enough. I don't have much to leave behind. No inheritance, no savings. Just a daughter who's stronger than she should have to be, and a son too young to remember any of this. If you are someone kind, please take care of Chloe. She doesn't need much, not toys or new clothes. She needs someone who won't lie to her, someone who will keep her brother by her side no matter what. That's all I ask. Keep them together. Love them if you can, and if you can't, at least don't separate them. Thank you, whoever you are. I hope you're the one they find. Lewis's voice faltered at the last line. He swallowed and looked up. Chloe's face was still, her hands clenched around the paper. She wrote that before she got too sick, she whispered. I remember. She kept it in her coat pocket. Lewis nodded slowly. She was brave. She knew we'd end up alone, Chloe said. No, Lewis said gently. She knew you'd find someone. She believed someone would care. Chloe looked at him. Do you think she'd be okay with us being here? With you? He nodded, certain. I think she would have liked me eventually. Chloe gave a small laugh. Quiet and real. Lewis reached over, brushing a curl away from her forehead. You're not alone anymore, Chloe. She didn't reply. She just leaned forward and placed the letter beside the picture frame on the shelf. The one with Lewis's own mother smiling in faded autumn light. Two mothers. Two stories side by side. Later, as the apartment settled into night, Chloe climbed into the bed she now called hers, pulling Nolan close beside her under the soft navy sweater she refused to replace. Louis watched from the hallway, arms crossed. They'd kicked off the slippers by the door. Left one light on in the hallway. A cup of water sat beside the bed, halfway full. He took it all in, the clutter, the small chaos, the weight of this new normal, and felt something break open in the quietest way. He walked back into the living room, sat down with the letter still in his hand, and stared out at the city lights beyond the glass. They blinked like signals in the dark. He looked back toward the bedroom, where Chloe had just rolled over and tucked Nolan's arm beneath her chin. And Louis whispered to the empty room, to the past that brought them here, your mother sent 2 angels. And she sent them right when I needed them most. This wasn't a rescue, this was family, starting again. What did you think of Louis, Chloe, and Nolan's journey? Did their quiet, unexpected bond make you reflect on what truly defines family? Personally, this story reminded me that sometimes the people we least expect and the moments we never planned end up teaching us the most about love, sacrifice, and starting over. What life lesson did it leave with you?